His name was Jack, and he was looking for a place to live. I owned a duplex and was living in one side of it while renting out the other side. My most recent tenants had just moved out, so I put an ad out and put a sign in the yard. I was divorced and had been for nearly 3 years. My wife had decided that I didn't make enough money to put her in the lifestyle she felt she was entitled to, and my ambition level was such that she didn't expect me to manage that anytime soon, if ever. Linda didn't feel she should have to work. She felt her job was taking care of me and our future children, which were now no longer going to exist, and it was my job to provide for the family. This allowed her plenty of time to eventually get involved with local multimillionaire Walter Hobbs and to eventually leave me for him. She and I had been married for 9 years at the time. She was 30 then, and he was 27 years her senior. But he was loaded and single, and that's all that mattered to her at the time. Despite her relationship with Walter, the court saw fit to divide everything we owned 50-50, and Linda made no effort to dissuade them of this decision. I managed to scrape together enough to make a significant down payment on this duplex, and the rent I charged on the other side made a big dent in the mortgage for the entire property. The unit had been available for about a week when I got Jack's voicemail asking if he could take a look at the place. I called him back, and we set an appointment for that weekend. I was in my garage workshop awaiting his arrival, and saw his little white import pull up to the curb. I watched as Jack pulled himself from the small car. My first impression was that he was about my age, early 30s, and was what I would assume ladies would think was good-looking. His demeanor, however, was not one of confidence but rather sadness and resignation. I wiped my hands and went out to greet him. "Jack?" We shook hands. "That's right. Jack Jamil. You must be Henry." "Sure am. Let's take a look at the place." I was pretty handy around the house, so had replaced the carpet in the living room since the last tenant moved, plus I had repainted the entire place. Since it was a mirror image to my half, I knew where everything was and gave him the so-called grand tour. He seemed interested as we went outside. "I like it, Henry, but could you come down 100 euros on the rent? It's a little more than I can afford. I know it's asking a lot, but I just got divorced, so I don't have much, and I need someplace where my kids can stay when I have them." "I understand, Jack. I don't have kids, but I'm divorced myself, and my wife got a lot of the money when she left, even though she cheated on me. Kind of a crappy system where a woman can cheat and basically get rewarded, am I right?" Jack hesitated just a bit, but then quickly agreed with me, adding, "My cheating wife even got custody of the kids." I saw an opportunity to help someone who was in much the same place I was a few years ago, so I agreed to lower the rent for the first year, and we could see where things stood at that point. He thanked me for my understanding, and we went in and completed the paperwork. His credit was lower than I would have liked, but with the divorce I wasn't surprised, so I let it slide. He brought his stuff over after work each night that week, and I helped him get set up as best I could. Once he was all settled, I invited him to drink and throw some steaks on the grill. I offered to treat since he was a little short. "So, do your kids live near here?" Obviously his kids lived with his ex, but I didn't want to upset him by mentioning her. "My old house is about 20 minutes away, but I chose here because it's close to work, and that's all I've got right now." I recalled from his application that he was a salesman at the Toyota dealer that was on the interstate and not too far from here. Jack explained that he and his wife had 2 kids, ages 2 and 4. His wife worked part-time for a local bank, and he said she slept with someone that worked nearby. He said he forgave her more than once, but she wouldn't stop. Or rather, she said she couldn't stop because she craved the experience so much. Eventually it tore them apart, and now he's paying child support and alimony, so he's struggling despite making a good income at the dealership. Her name was Linda, and she was my ex-wife. I told Jack more details about Linda and how she had volunteered to work on the campaign for a mayoral candidate that she believed in. Walter Hobbs was one of his biggest supporters and donors, and she had been asked to be a sort of liaison with him directly, mostly to ensure the donations kept coming in. As you have probably guessed, he became quite smitten with her beauty, and she became quite smitten with his bank account. It wasn't long before he was asking her to be his date for various fundraisers and charity events. I raised plenty of objections, but Linda assured me it was all perfectly innocent and part of her job. Eventually, the night started getting later and later, and there was little doubt about what was happening. Finally, I came home from work one day to find her at the table with divorce papers in hand and her things already packed. There were tears and apologies and the like, but it was made clear that I couldn't change her mind. Not that I wanted to by that point, but she felt compelled to make sure I understood. I was particularly irritated that she sought a 50-50 split of the assets since she was leaving for a rich guy. But she justified it by saying that anything could happen between now and the day they got married, and she needed to have backup resources. To her credit, she didn't ask for alimony, and I sure as hell didn't offer. The final decree that I picked up from my attorney 90 days later was anticlimactic. She was already living with old Walter in his ridiculously oversized mansion, and I wasn't seeing anyone, so it was really just the final piece of a puzzle that had been mostly completed and collecting dust. Jack and I spent the rest of the evening watching a ball game on TV before calling it a night, and over the next 3 months we hung out quite a bit. I got the impression he didn't have many friends, but I didn't really push for information. One night about this time, after Jack had just left to head over to his side, there was a knock on the door. Jack had left so recently that I assumed he had forgotten something, if only that had been the case. "Hi, Linda." My ex-wife stepped through the door without so much as a hello. Unfortunately, I had left a large gap when I opened the door and she took advantage. I turned to see her standing behind me and having turned to face me. She wore some outfit that I assumed was name brand and very expensive. It certainly looked like it. I never could understand paying those kinds of prices just because of who made it. "Good evening, Henry. How are you tonight?" "Same as always, Lynn. What do you want?" "Do I have to want something in order to stop off at my ex-husband's house to visit?" "So you're saying all you want to do is say hi, play catch-up with our lives?" "Not at all. I was just asking a question, but the truth is there is something that I would like. I can't imagine what that would be. We split everything fair and square, at least as far as the courts are concerned. What is it you want?" "Henry, are you seeing anyone these days?" "How is that your business exactly?" "It's not really, but it goes to why I'm here." "No, at least no one in particular. Now what's this about?" "Make love to me." Well, that was a surprise. We let that kind of hang out there and stare at each other across the room as I quickly wondered what her angle could be. Only one possibility came to mind. "Old Walter not getting it done, Linda?" "Well, he just turned 60. He has those pills that are very helpful, but they only make him able. They don't give him energy and stamina, and in truth it's never really been that great. I thought it was at first, but I realized that it was fueled by being with someone new and the thrill of doing something naughty." "Does he know you're here?" "Not exactly, no, but he's in London and I'm here, and what he doesn't know. You're a good-looking woman, Lynn. You could have just about any guy out there. So why are you here?" "For a couple of reasons. One, I can't count on the discretion of someone I barely know from a fleeting encounter in a bar, and considering who I am, or rather who my husband is, I must be discreet. I trust you completely." "You think I'd keep your secret even after you cheated on me?" "You're an honorable and kind man, Henry. I don't believe you would be so vindictive as to rat me out, even feeling about me the way you do." "Assuming that's true, and I'm not saying it is, you said there were a couple of reasons." "I did, that's true, Henry. My faithfulness, or lack thereof aside, I think you and I would both agree that in the bedroom you and I were hotter than an active volcano. You were by far the best I ever had, and I'm pretty sure you'd say the same thing. We made magic in bed, and I'd like to have that again. So you want this to be a regular thing? I'll take whatever you'll give me, but a regular thing would certainly be wonderful, and you have to admit there's a certain poetry to it. I cheated on you with him, and now I'd be cheating on him with you." The look on her face suggested she was quite proud of how she had worked this out. This was certainly not the woman I had married, and I was amazed at the change in just a few years from someone that valued fidelity, or at least said she did, to someone who was treating adultery in such a casual manner. "Linda, I agree that you and I were a force to be reckoned with in the bedroom, but you know very well that I'm not a casual intimacy kind of guy. I don't just hop into bed with a woman. I have to feel something for her, and, frankly, I just don't feel anything for you anymore. Even if I did it just to be nice, it wouldn't be the same for either of us. You never know unless you try. Maybe some of those old feelings would come back. Maybe, but the fact is I don't want them back. Losing you the first time was hard enough. I have no desire to go through those feelings again. I'm going to have to decline your offer. Sorry, Lynn." Her shoulders slumped as she let out a sigh. She clearly thought she could persuade me to share a casual, no-commitment moment of intimacy with her, even though she was likely finding occasional companionship with old Walter, and I hadn't been with anyone since our last time together before that fateful night. I got the sense she needed this far more than I did. Well, you can't blame a girl for trying. Thanks for your time, Henry. I opened the door and she swept out much as she had swept in when she first arrived. She paused just outside the door and turned to say one more thing. Henry, please don't doubt that I still love you and wish things had turned out differently. She gave me a quick peck on the cheek and then she was gone. Her name was Julie, and she was Jack's ex-wife. I met her for the first time about 5 months into Jack's residence in my duplex. One of the terms of his divorce was that he had to provide the transportation for his weekend visits, so there was no reason for Julie to come over to his place. Suddenly that changed. I was in my workshop, as I usually was in the evenings, when I saw Jack coming home from work, on a bicycle. His car wasn't in his driveway. I had been aware that it hadn't been there for a few days but didn't give it much thought until now when I saw him but not his car. My first thought was that it was in the shop, but that wasn't the case. Hey, Jack. Yeah, Henry? What's with the bike? Where's your car? Oh, I decided to get healthier, so I started biking to and from work. It's really made a difference. Okay, but what about your car? Don't you need that to get your kids? He started to answer, but apparently couldn't come up with a reasonable response, and suddenly his whole body slumped, and he looked at me with sadness in his eyes, like that first day I'd met him. He finally resigned from telling me the truth. I had to sell it. I had a couple of off months at work, and between what I owe my ex-wife, and the rent, I needed the cash. They don't have cars at the dealer you can use? Only for management. Salespeople are on their own. But how are you going to get your kids? Julie agreed to do the driving until I can get back on my feet. Jack, you should have come and talked to me. We could have worked something out. I know you're good for it, and us victimized husbands need to stick together. I'm not rich, but I could have given you a break for a while. I appreciate that, Henry, but I didn't want to be in your debt if I could help it. I'd feel like I was taking advantage of our friendship. Fair enough, but if you have any more problems, you come to me and we figure it out, all right? He agreed, and then wheeled his bike into his garage. I felt bad for the struggles he was enduring, all because his wife had been unfaithful. Sure, she had agreed to drive the kids back and forth, but it wouldn't be necessary except for what she had done. I had never met the woman, but I didn't like her very much. That changed on Friday when she came by to drop the kids off for Jack's weekend. They pulled into the driveway and Jack immediately came out to greet them. He helped his kids, now 5-year-old Jasmine and 3-year-old Johnny, out of the car and thanked his ex for dropping them off. I could see in his expression that he missed her, but she seemed a little cold. I have to admit she was one beautiful woman. She was not very tall, maybe 5 feet, but had a nice body, as evidenced by the workout clothes she was wearing. She was not very chesty, but had a nice butt and thick, powerful-looking thighs, which was my thing. She caught me staring and gave a little smile as she yelled, "Did you get a good look?" Though there didn't actually seem to be any anger in her tone. Embarrassed, I simply turned back to the project at hand and hoped she'd be on her way. No such luck, it turns out, as I soon felt her tap me on the shoulder. "You didn't answer my question." "Yes, I did, and I'm sorry. It was inappropriate. It won't happen again." "See that it doesn't," she said. But again I got the sense that she wasn't mad, and in fact thought it was kind of funny. She took another step into my garage workshop at all the various tools and benches I had. I think it's a pretty impressive setup, especially for being in a single-car garage. It got a little tight sometimes, but I made it work. "This is a lot of stuff. What kind of work do you do in here?" "I build custom furniture. I'm working on a rocking chair right now." "Really? That's interesting. My grandfather used to make small wooden toys and stuff in his basement. Nothing on your scale, but he enjoyed doing it and liked giving the toys to the kids in the neighborhood. I got to help him sometimes. We became very close." She actually seemed genuinely interested and asked some intelligent questions, and so I was motivated to at least give her a good tour. We ended up talking for about an hour, and she was very nice. A few times over that hour I thought, "It's too bad she's so unfaithful," or words to that effect. The next day, Jack was in the yard playing with his kids and asked about his ex having stayed around so long. He had noticed her car didn't leave for some time. I explained about her interest in my workshop and the look around I gave her. Did she talk about us or our marriage? No, it never came up. He seemed relieved at that answer, which I couldn't entirely understand but didn't give it much thought. I presumed he just wanted his private life left out of the conversation. When Julie came to pick up the kids on Sunday evening, Jack made a point of engaging her in conversation, and it looked like it got a little heated, though I didn't hear what was said. At points during their talk, they both looked in my direction, and I assumed they were trying to be sure I didn't hear their private business. When they were done and Jack had seemingly made his point, he retrieved and loaded up the kids and they drove away. Afterwards, he walked over to me. "Everything okay, Jack? It looked like things got a little bumpy there." "Oh, ex-wife stuff, nothing worth talking about." We drank a little bit before parting for the evening. The next couple of weeks passed without incident. My regular daytime, bill-paying job as maintenance director for a local fast food franchisor was uneventful. I really enjoyed the job. I didn't like being stuck in an office, so having a job that sent me from location to location, doing repairs, with really no supervision, was like a dream come true for me, job-wise. As long as I got my work done, I was mostly left alone. Of course, it would never make me rich and was the reason that Linda sought greener pastures. I was in my workshop again when Julie dropped off the kids that next Friday. I always had a few projects going and now was no exception. Because my projects were custom, they were made to requested specifications. The rocking chair I was currently working on, for example, was for a large man, so he had asked for a wider seat and more support, and were fairly pricey. I actually hoped to make this a full-time business at some point, but I wasn't there yet. It had been a hobby when I was married, but I had spent the past 3 years trying to grow it and was having decent success. Jack got the kids out of the car, and again said something to his ex that seemed to involve me in some way. She seemed irritated by whatever he was saying and then got right into her car and left even before Jack and the kids were in the house. I sure did wonder what was going on. I got the answer to that question on Sunday when she came to pick the kids back up. She arrived about an hour early and actually parked up the street at a couple of houses, which was apparently to keep her car out of Jack's sightlines, and came over to where I was working. I greeted her politely, but again I didn't have a particular affection for her, so I was confused as to why she was coming to see me. "I'm not supposed to talk to you." "What do you mean?" "I know you saw Jack and me talking last time and again on Friday. He says he doesn't want me talking to you, that you're his friend and I need to stay away from you. And yet here you are. I enjoy talking to you and watching you do the work you're doing." I didn't really know what to say to that, so all I could manage was, "Interesting. I'd have to ask Jack about this later." We talked while I worked until it was time for her to get the kids. We didn't even talk about Jack. We talked about movies and music and even dabbled in politics. But I found that to be a dangerous topic and kept it to a minimum. I found her to be very interesting and easy to talk to, and of course very physically attractive, if only she wasn't a cheater. Interestingly, when it was time to get the kids, she went and got her car and drove it up to the front of Jack's house to give the appearance that she had just arrived, I presume. Jack brought the kids out almost immediately and put them in the car. As Jack knelt down to say goodbye to his kids, Julie caught my eye and gave me a smile and a little wink. I decided against asking Jack about his no-contact order between me and his ex. I didn't really care, but I was curious about it. I assumed he was just trying to create a boundary, to keep her out of what was now his life as much as possible. But asking about it would let on that I knew about it, and the only way I could know about it was if Julie told me. And for some reason, I thought that to be a bad idea just now. The next of Jack's visitation weekends found me out of town. I had flown back to California to visit with my family, which I did a few times a year. My parents are divorced. Dad had an optometrist shop and had a fling with his assistant, which my mother did not appreciate and promptly sent him packing. Mom now works for a real estate office and Dad is on wife number 3. The following visit, the visits are every 2 weeks in case that wasn't clear before now, brought something of a surprise. The drop-off went the same, and on Sunday Julie came early to talk with me as she had before, only this time she had a request. After some pleasantries and her inquiry as to my whereabouts 2 weeks ago, she hit me with it. "Say, Henry, my bank is sponsoring a big fundraising dinner at the Four Seasons next week and I was wondering if you'd be my escort." I was certainly flattered by the offer, but I wasn't inclined to accept it. First of all, I was worried about how it would affect Jack personally, and also our friendship. Also, since I had no intention of getting involved with a woman that felt the need to cheat, I saw no reason to go even a step down that path. What about Jack? We're divorced and everyone knows it. If I were to show up with him, it would set the tongues wagging, and I have no interest in being the topic of conversation. Well then, there's probably some guy in your office or that works nearby that could take you. I was remembering what Jack had said about her extramarital liaison. Again, that would get people talking. If I were to show up with a coworker, it would definitely crank up the rumor mill, not to mention maybe giving the guy ideas which could make things uncomfortable. The truth was I wouldn't mind going, and I've always had a soft spot for helping someone in need. I don't know, Julie. That's not really my thing. Surely there's someone out there that won't crank up the gossip mill. Actually, besides Jack and the men I work with, you're the only man I know. Please, Henry. It includes dinner and there'll even be a dance floor. It could be fun. My resolve weakened at the mention of free food and a night out. I reasoned that just because I went with Julie didn't mean I had to stay with her the whole night. I had actually been considering trying to rebuild a social life, and this might be the opportunity to do just that. All right, Julie, what do I need to wear? Do you have a suit? Not a new one. I've had it for some time and I use it for funerals and such. It would probably be out of place for something like this. Maybe it's time for a new one. Actually, it was. That was something I had also been considering but hadn't needed one since my great-grandmother's funeral a couple of years ago, so I kept putting it off. I agreed to see what I could arrange on short notice. Also, I didn't want Jack to know about this, so I told Julie she'd need to bring the kids to Jack's. He was babysitting for her. And then go back home. And I would pick her up there. The next day, I was at a local menswear shop getting fitted for a nice black suit. Yes, black, always black. It works anywhere for anything. It cost me extra to get it tailored in time for the party, but that's the way it goes. I also got a belt, new shoes, and a couple of shirts and ties. There go the profits from the rocking chair. When the evening of the party rolled around, I dressed myself up and left the house as Jack was herding the kids inside. I wanted to avoid him seeing me dressed up, thinking he might somehow make the connection that I was escorting his ex. My plan worked smoothly, and I arrived at Julie's right on time. She, of course, was not quite ready, having just gotten back to her house a few minutes before I did. She was mostly dressed but had some makeup to put on and to put the finish on her hair. But when she came out, my first thought was that the wait was totally worth it. She wore a sleeveless burgundy gown that stopped just above her ankles. It hugged her curves and emphasized them while minimizing the display of her breasts, which, as I mentioned, were on the small side. Her deep raven hair had been straightened and hung down, except for a small section that she had pinned back behind her left ear. She was positively stunning, and I told her so. She smiled widely, pleased at the compliment, and I took her arm and escorted her to my truck. It was nothing fancy, but it was in good shape. I needed a truck primarily to accommodate my furniture projects, but the cab was quite clean and well kept. As I expected, the party was highbrow, and I felt out of place from the first moment. These people just exuded class. They were friendly, but seemed to sense that I wasn't one of them. Julie was peppered with questions about who I was, a friend, and I admit to being impressed with the way she handled all the questions and seemed perfectly at ease. We found our table and sat for a few minutes before being approached by some older couples. I was introduced to the bank vice president and his wife, along with Julie's branch manager and her husband. The evening rolled along predictably. There were speeches and a large check showing the amount of the donation was ceremoniously presented. There didn't seem to be a lot of partner swapping happening on the dance floor, so what dancing I did was done with Julie, though I found I didn't mind that so much. Her body was soft and warm, and I found myself responding. Of course, in this environment there was no dirty dancing type stuff going on, so I doubt she was aware of it. When the evening was over, I dropped Julie off at her house. I escorted her to the door and got the sense she was looking for a good night kiss, but that would have implied this was more than it was, so I simply thanked her for an enjoyable evening and headed back to my truck. She waited just outside her slightly open door and waved as I pulled away. As I drove home, I again lamented Julie's nature. Given a different set of circumstances, I could definitely see wanting to get to know her better. But this evening out did tell me that I might just be ready to dip my toe back in the dating pool. The next couple of months went along as normal. Julie brought the kids over for their visitation with Jack, and on Sundays when she would arrive early so she could sit and chat with me for a while. Then she'd get her car and pull up to Jack's house, and off she went with the kids. Despite my intentions, I hadn't really developed much of a social life, and I found myself looking forward to her visits. Then I had a date. It was a blind date, but a date nonetheless. One of the restaurant managers that I had become friends with had a friend she thought I might be compatible with, and asked if I'd mind if she set us up. What the hell, I thought, and gave her the go-ahead. After a get-to-know-you phone call, we set a date for that Friday night. The date itself was nothing special. She was pretty and nice, but there was no spark. We had a good time, but when I walked her to the door, I exchanged a simple handshake and nothing more was said about getting together again. A few weeks later, I ran across the manager, who had set us up, and she said her friend felt the same way I did about her. I was nice enough, but didn't catch her interest, and there were no hard feelings. However, when Julie came around that Sunday night to pick up the kids, she asked where I had been on Friday since I hadn't been in the workshop when she dropped the kids off. I told her about the date, and her expression changed, and I swear there was a slight smile when I told her it didn't work out and we didn't plan to see each other again, but I couldn't be sure. On the next custody weekend, Julie broke the pattern and stopped to see me on Friday. She dropped off the kids, then drove away before coming around the other way and parking out of sight like she did during pickup. Hey Jules, this is a surprise. I wanted to ask you a favor. Sure, what's up? There's a couple of guys at work that have been putting the moves on me. I told you before I wasn't interested in dating anyone from work, but they keep on asking. Finally, I told them I already had a boyfriend, and I'd let him know if they didn't stop bothering me. I hoped that was the end of it, but then they asked if it was the guy I had brought to the corporate party, meaning you, and without really thinking I said yes. So you just need me to be okay with you floating me out there as your boyfriend to keep the wolves at bay, that's fine. Actually, I was going to ask for a little more than that. I'm listening. A bunch of us from work are going out tomorrow night, and they insisted I bring my boyfriend since everyone else will be bringing their significant others. I was wondering if you'd mind going with me. Ugh. The idea of a night out with a bunch of people I didn't know had very little appeal, and pretending to be Julie's boyfriend while doing that didn't make things any better. Though I found myself enjoying the idea of spending another evening out with her. But since I knew there was no future with her because of her cheating on Jack, I couldn't very well try anything with her because that might give her the wrong idea, but since I would be her date, it wouldn't be appropriate for anything to happen with anybody else. But in the end, I did exactly what you probably expected. I said yes. The one thing I did feel bad about was doing this behind Jack's back, especially when he invited me over to watch the game that night, and I had to decline because of my date with Julie. I thought about telling Jack about it, but even though I knew there was no future for Julie and me, I wasn't sure how Jack would react, so I kept it to myself. There ended up being 8 couples altogether, including both of the guys that had been putting the moves on Julie. They both had dates with them, but apparently they were just that, dates. They weren't serious or monogamous, they just went out together every once in a while. Both of the women were drop-dead gorgeous, and part of me wondered if one or both of the guys hoped their dates would seduce me away from Julie, thus making her available. Dinner at Texas Roadhouse was good but uneventful. They managed to get us into 3 large booths next to each other so that we could keep up the conversation. After dinner, we went to a country and western bar and dance club, and that's where things got interesting. At first, everyone was dancing with their own partners, but it wasn't too long before some mixing took place, and Julie got asked a couple of times by the workplace Casanovas. She turned them both down without hesitation, and they retreated. Julie seemed to be enjoying the music and put them out of her mind, but I kept an eye on both couples, and it looked like they went to a corner to strategize. Sure enough, the larger-breasted of the 2 women made her way over to me while Julie made her way to the restroom. Her name was Destiny, or so she said, and she had long blonde curls and breast that couldn't possibly be all natural. She plopped herself into Julie's chair uninvited. "You know," she said, "it's not fair that the best-looking guy in the place is monopolized by just one woman. How about showing me around the dance floor?" I gave her a little smile and thanked her for the compliment, and then politely declined her offer. That seemed to surprise her, and it occurred to me she probably had rarely, if ever, been told no by a man. "Are you sure, big boy? I'll make it worth your while." "And just how do you plan to do that?" Well, you know, Johnny and me aren't really together. He just needed a date for tonight and invited me along. I always agree, and he understands that just because I came with him doesn't mean I'm going to leave with him, if you catch my drift. I'd like to leave with you, and I promise you won't be disappointed. That's certainly an inviting offer, Destiny, but I'm going to pass. You can't mean you'd rather spend the night with that Nancy you came with rather than me. You're really going to turn down the chance to make my body your own personal playground? Her name is Julie, and I'd take her over you every time. She may not have your, assets, but it might do you well to remember a few things. Not every guy is into plastic body parts, and even if I did find your playground interesting, frankly, I'm far too concerned with how many others have played there to ever think about doing it myself. For some reason, she became indignant and seemed insulted, and she stalked away. I watched with interest as she and the other 3 co-conspirators gathered again, presumably to debrief. That was very nice. Thank you. The voice came from behind me and startled me a bit. Julie then came around the table and took her seat next to me. What was? I heard what you said about me and it was nice. When I came out of the restroom and saw Silicone Barbie sitting next to you, I was afraid you might leave with her. I was flattered when you said you'd choose me over her. And it has the advantage of being true. I'm far less interested in the package than I am in what's inside, though frankly she came up short on both counts. As the night wore on, we danced a few times but spent much of the evening talking. Johnny and his cohorts never bothered us again. The party broke up around midnight and I took her home, again avoiding anything resembling intimacy and going on my way. The next night, Julie arrived early as usual. She thanked me for a nice time last night and then asked if she could ask me another favor. By now I think we both knew I would say yes if it wasn't too onerous, and so the following weekend I found myself again suited up, this time to attend the wedding of one of her friends from work. Jack was watching the kids even though this wasn't his weekend, and I again had to beg off when he invited me to hang out. Weddings, as most people know, are different from anything else in terms of a social situation. The entire atmosphere is thick with love and romance, not just for the new happy couple but for everyone in attendance, and even I was not immune to it. Julie and I danced several times, and there was a different vibe than when we had done it in the club. Her body was pressed closer to mine than she had done before, and I even found myself holding her a little closer, a little tighter than I had before as well. She put her head on my shoulder and I could feel her breath against my neck. I was feeling a stirring of desire, and I was fairly certain she could sense it. Eventually the party wound down, and Julie and I took our leave. I took back to her house and then drove back to my house, making it inside without Jack seeing me dressed up. I doubted he would make any connection between Julie and me, but I was still being careful. A bit later I heard Julie's car pull up and I watched her through the window. She truly was a beautiful woman, and I found myself cursing the circumstances that prevented us from making a go of things. And watching her made me think about the closeness we had shared at the wedding, and I felt a familiar stirring within me. I must have been distracted by watching Julie because I never even heard Linda's car pull up. The first I was aware of it was when there was a knock on the door, and only then did I realize that Julie's gaze had shifted to my walkway. She was watching Linda make her way to my door. I opened the door, and Linda again strode in uninvited. She wore stockings and high heels, along with a long trench coat that was really out of place for the weather. I was just about to mention that when the coat dropped to the floor and revealed that Linda was wearing nothing except that coat, those stockings, and those heels. Linda, you need to put your coat back on and go. No, Henry, I mean to make love to you and I'm not leaving until we do. With that, she plopped herself onto my couch. Shall we adjourn to the bedroom or do you want to take me right here? Linda, I told you no. You made your choice and now you have to live with it. I'm no more willing to be the other man than I was being the one cheated on. Now please get dressed and leave, and don't come here again unless you have a good reason and call first. But Henry, she whined. No, Linda, you need to leave. With no shortage of pouting, she picked up her coat and put it on. She walked slowly to the door and opened it, but before she left she had one more thing to say. Henry, for what it's worth I regret my choice. The money is nice, but I feel mostly empty. I thought it would be different, but I'd give it all up to go back to what we had. I miss it and I miss you so much. Is there any chance you'd take me back if I left Walter? No chance, Linda. I can't tell you what to do about Walter, but coming back to me is not an option. I'm sorry. She nodded in resignation. She knew the answer before she asked the question, but figured it couldn't hurt to ask. I think she was wrong about that thought. I'm pretty sure my rejection hurt her more than she tried to let on. Without another word, she walked out the door and drove away. I looked out the window and Julie's car was nowhere to be seen. The next weekend passed without a visit from Julie. She came and dropped off the kids as normal, but on Sunday she didn't come early as she had been. She pulled straight up to the Jacks and picked up the kids. In neither case did she even look in my direction. I guess she was done with me and tried to push it out of my mind. Of course, human nature being what it is, I was not particularly successful at putting it behind me. Even though we weren't going anywhere, I had enjoyed spending time with her, and now it seemed I had done something to piss her off. And not knowing what that might have made me more than a little curious, so I made up my mind to try and find out. I needed to try and get her attention without Jack being aware of it. After giving it some thought, I had an idea, and I patiently waited 2 weeks for Jack's next visitation. When Julie's car pulled up and before Jack was out of the house, I held up a large, dry erase board that I had for making notes. On it, I had written, "Can you please come 10 minutes early on Sunday so we can talk?" She saw the message, made a thoughtful face, and then simply looked me in the eyes and nodded. I smiled, and that was that. On Sunday, she pulled up out of sight and walked over to where I awaited her inside my workshop. She wore something of a scowl. "So I'm here. What do you want?" I was a bit taken aback by the vitriol, especially considering all the favors I had done for her, and suddenly I wasn't concerned about her opinion. "You know what? Never mind. I was going to ask why you're suddenly so hostile towards me, but I don't think I care anymore." We stared at each other in silence for several seconds before she finally broke the silence. "Did you have a good time last weekend?" "Yes, I did. But you already knew that. I told you so after the reception." "I don't mean the wedding. I meant what happened after you got home." Confused, I thought back to Saturday night. I don't remember doing anything different than usual, and then I remembered Linda's visit and how Julie had watched her go up my walkway. "Are you talking about Linda? Is that her name? How much did she cost you?" Obviously she had leapt to some assumptions here, and I was not of a mind to clarify things for her. Besides, who the hell was she to be butting into my personal life and judging me? "Yes, that's her name, and she cost me plenty. But I fail to see how any of that is your business or reason for you to start treating me poorly." She faltered a little before rallying. "I guess I just thought you were better than that. I didn't think you were the kind of guy that would use a woman for your own needs. But now I know better." "You don't know a thing, Julie, but since you saw fit to just decide what the truth was without talking to me, I guess there's nothing left to say. Your kids are waiting." With that, I stalked into my workshop. I was pissed. I try really hard to be a nice guy and an upstanding person, and she sees one thing, takes it out of context, and assumes I'm paying someone for intimacy. Not that her opinion really mattered, I tried to convince myself, but I didn't like people having the wrong idea about me. Yeah, that's it. I watched out the window as Jack loaded the kids in the car and Julie pulled away, though she did take a lingering look back toward my place before driving away. Maybe my objections had had an effect. Not 5 minutes later there was a knock on my door that I assumed was Jack, but a check of the peephole saw Julie's face on the other side. My face scrunched in confusion as I opened the door. "So, if I'm wrong, explain it to me," she said without so much as a greeting. "Jules, where are the kids?" "They're in the car right there, and I have the AC on so I can keep an eye on them if we talk right here. So tell me what I got wrong." "You got it all wrong, Julie. Linda is my ex-wife. She dumped me 3 years ago to marry a guy twice her age who can barely satisfy her anymore, so she's been trying to recruit me as her casual partner. What you saw last weekend was her latest attempt. If you'd stayed another 5 minutes, you'd have seen me kick her out, and obviously without having gotten what she came for." "Oh, Henry, I'm sorry. You're right. I made an assumption, and I was wrong. And that's why you started ignoring me." "It is, like I said, I just didn't think you were that kind of person, and it upset me." "Okay, so now you know the truth. Are we good? Friends?" "Yes, definitely. I'm sorry again." She gave me a hug, one that lasted a little longer than a casual and friendly one should, and then got into her car and drove away. I had to be honest about my feelings here. I really liked Julie, and were it not for her habit of committing adultery, I would probably almost call it love. And that kind of ticked me off, because I had promised myself I wouldn't develop feelings for her when I agreed to start escorting her to these things. I was going to keep my distance and use her as a means of starting a social life. The problem was that I enjoyed being with her, and really hadn't done anything to make a social life other than what I did with her, nor did I want to. And what to make of her reaction to Linda. Did I really believe that it was all because she didn't think I was the kind of guy who would seek out that kind of service? Not really, and that led to the likelihood that maybe she was jealous of Linda, and that led to the almost inescapable conclusion that she had some feelings for me as well. But nothing could ever happen, or so I told myself. In addition to her being a cheater, there was the fact that she was Jack's ex, and I really worried about how that would affect Jack, both in terms of our friendship and him individually. The next weekend, of course, wasn't one of Jack's kid weekends, so he came on Saturday to grill some burgers and watch the game. Jack was a nice guy, and I enjoyed hanging out with him, though I felt bad for spending time with his ex behind his back, or so I thought. You and Julie seemed to be spending a lot of time together. I had been so sure that he didn't know that his statement shocked me, and I didn't have a ready response. Don't look so surprised, Henry. I'm not as unobservant as you might think. Is anything going to happen between you two? Look, Jack, I'm sorry about this. She asked me to escort her to a few things because she said she didn't know any other men she was comfortable with, and I didn't tell you because I was afraid it would upset you. I figured that, but you didn't answer my question. Is anything going to happen between you two? No, absolutely not. Why not? Aren't you attracted to her? Sure I am, Jack. She's one of the most beautiful women I've ever met. But nothing will happen for two reasons. One, she's your ex-wife, and I really don't want to hurt you, and I'm afraid that seeing us together would upset you. And two, knowing she cheated on you and told you she wouldn't give it up, well, I've already been down that road and I don't want to go there again. He just nodded his head and said, I see, and that was the end of the conversation. I was tempted to ask how he would feel about me continuing to see Julie as I had been, meaning as an escort for certain events, but I chose not to. The following Tuesday I was in my workshop starting the planning for a new custom cutting board that was next on my list, having finished and shipped out the rocking chair last week. When Jack came by after work, he had a very serious look on his face, so I invited him over for a drink. Thanks. I think I'm going to need one. The wording struck me as odd. Going to need instead of already needing one, but maybe he just misspoke. We sat out on my deck in the backyard in silence for about 15 minutes, and several times I got the feeling he was working up the nerve to say something. Finally, it just came out. She didn't cheat on me. I cheated on her, and more than once she would never do that. In fact, her loyalty to me got her to forgive me several times, but just couldn't bring herself to do it the last time. She caught me with one of the parts department ladies. I let that information take root in my mind for a few minutes before I was prepared to say anything, and Jack patiently waited for me to respond. Why'd you lie to me, Jack? I don't have many friends. All our couple friends dumped me after the divorce, and the friends I had at work started avoiding me. Their wives felt I was a bad influence and pressured them to stay away from me. I figured if you thought we had a wife that cheated in common, we could sort of bond over that shared experience. I figured you'd probably never meet her, so it wouldn't matter. And then I had to sell my car and she had to come over here. Is that why you told her not to talk to me? I asked, suddenly remembering that moment in time. I didn't know you knew about that. Yeah, I was afraid she'd tell you that I had been the cheater and it would all blow up in my face. We sat in silence for another few minutes as we both considered the implications of this conversation. Finally, I asked a question. So why are you telling me this now? He glanced over at me and then looked back into the sky again as we had been doing all evening. She's been asking me about you. She told me that you guys had spent a lot of time together, though I already knew that, and asked if you had said anything about her. She says you guys always have a great time together and she doesn't understand why nothing more has happened. When you told me the other night that it was mostly because she had cheated on me, I knew I had to come clean. It just took me a few days to realize that and work up the nerve. I also told you that wasn't the only reason. Yeah, my feelings, I remember. And make no mistake, Henry, it will hurt to see her with another man, be it you or someone else. I still love her with everything I've got, and I really want her to be happy, and that can't be with me anymore. So Henry, please, if you have feelings for her and want to be with her, you have my blessing and my encouragement. I've let her down so many times, and I refuse to fail her again by keeping her from being with someone she wants." With that, he climbed out of his chair, thanked me for the drinks, and headed back to his side of the duplex. I was blown away. I admit that I had trouble believing Julie was a serial cheater, but I suppose there's really no way to know for sure just by hanging out with someone. I suddenly had to rethink everything I had thought, and the way forward was clear. That Friday, Julie came to drop off the kids as usual. I made a point of being in the workshop, and I again held up the dry erase board asking her to come talk to me. She glanced back at Jack and waited for him to go inside with the kids before coming to talk to me. "That's not the rocking chair. What are you working on now?" "I shipped out the chair last week. This is a cutting board for a new house someone is building." "That's nice. I like the design." "Thanks. So any big plans for the weekend?" "No, I'll probably just clean the house since Jack has the kids." "You?" "I was thinking of making the 2-hour drive out to the coast and getting a hotel room on the beach. Maybe spending the weekend on the beach relaxing in the sun to celebrate finishing the chair. The weather is supposed to be nice." There was some disappointment in her voice when she spoke. "That sounds like fun. Bringing anyone along or just you?" "Actually, there is someone very special I'm planning on bringing, if she's up for it." "Oh, well, she's very lucky." I used my hand and lifted up her chin, which had drooped when I mentioned bringing someone along. "So how about it? Do you want to go?" A wide smile appeared on her face at first, and then her expression changed into that look you get when you find the perfect used car, but you don't want the salesperson to know you found the perfect used car. "That sounds like it could be fun. Would I be getting my own room?" "Well, you can if you want to, but that's not really what I had in mind. I think it would be okay to share a room." The smile was back. "What about beds?" "I'm going to insist on having one. I won't sleep on the floor." She gave me a playful look, and finally just decided to say what she meant. "What I mean, Henry, are you planning to be intimate with me this weekend or not?" "It was part of my plan, but again, if you'd rather not." She leapt at me and planted an intense kiss on my lips. Just like that, our arms were wrapped around each other, and we were kissing each other like it was the last time we'd ever do it. When are we leaving?" "That depends on how fast you can get back here after packing." "Give me an hour." Julie ran to her car and damn near left a vapor trail pulling away from the curb. True to her work, she was back with a small suitcase in an hour and 5 minutes. I had already loaded my suitcase in the truck, and soon we were on the road. The drive was mostly in silence. We talked here and there, but mostly we were just enjoying being in each other's company, and also in knowing that we were embarking on something more, something that could be forever. I was completely happy and comfortable being with Julie, and she seemed to feel the same way. There was one thing, though, that needed to be discussed before we got to the hotel. "Jules?" "Yes, baby." "We should talk about birth control." "No worries there. I've been on the pill since, well, let's just say I'm on the pill." "What were you going to say?" "It's nothing. Don't worry about it. Are we going to start our relationship by keeping secrets? I've already had one wife that did that. I'm not looking for another." "No, it's a little embarrassing." "If we're going to be together, then we'll have to get used to saying embarrassing things. Now come on." "All right, I was going to say that I've been on the pill since we went out that first time." "Why?" She was silent for several seconds, and I could practically feel her staring at me with the "you are so stupid" look. But she took pity on the poor idiot male and told me. "Because I was hoping what's about to happen would happen, that we would eventually get to this point." We got to the hotel and checked in. I had actually made reservations just after deciding what to do about Julie, and hoped she'd agree to come with me. From what she had told me in the car, I suspected she had been looking forward to this for some time, and the truth was that I was just as eager. No sooner had we gotten into the room than she was on me. Trying to undress while kissing is not an easy task, especially when you'd much rather have your hands on your partner and not on your buttons. Finally, we gave up the kissing and quickly shed our clothes and rejoined on the bed. As I said before, Julie didn't have much in the way of breasts, but she did have the nicest butt I had ever seen, and I spent a considerable amount of time worshiping it that night. We slept through breakfast, but grabbed some lunch at a nearby diner before heading out to the beach. It was actually pretty busy, and we lounged under a large beach umbrella, available for rental, and simply enjoyed the sights. Eventually, she asked the question that I kind of hoped she wouldn't. "So, why the change of heart, Henry?" "What do you mean, babe?" "I've been attracted to you since we first met. You never made a move, and I figured you were being loyal to Jack since he was your friend. But I still planned to try, so I asked you to take me to the company party, and you did, but nothing happened. Over the next several months, I got you, one way or the other, to take me out several times, and I tried my best to let you know I was interested, without simply stripping my clothes off and begging you to make love to me. And still I got nothing. Then all of a sudden you asked me to go away for the weekend and spend the night, and I guess I'm wondering why the sudden change. And remember, no secrets." "All right, Jules. But I want you to listen with an open mind, okay?" She agreed, and I proceeded to tell her everything that happened, starting from Jack moving in and telling me that she had cheated on him, and ending with him telling me the truth and why he had lied to me in the first place. I could tell she was pretty angry with him, but I wanted her to focus on what Jack had done right. "Look, baby, I know you're mad at him for lying, but he was in a bad spot and didn't think it would matter. But when it mattered, he came clean, even knowing it could cost him my friendship, because he still loves you and wants you to be happy, and doesn't want to fail you again. I know, it's just, we could have been together sooner, and I'm frustrated by that, but I'll get over it." Epilogue. Of course, Julie and I ended up getting married, but moving in and then introducing Julie in my life wasn't the end of the changes that Jack brought. I had gotten to know Jack and Julie's kids pretty well during Jack's visitation weekends, and it didn't seem to faze them at all when I started spending time with their mom, too. It wasn't long before I was Daddy Henry, and I found I really liked that. About 8 months after that weekend at the beach, Julie and I were making plans to move in together, with an eye towards getting married soon as well. The duplex was too small, and even if it wasn't, it would have been hard for Jack. Yes, he still lived there, and we remained friends. But it also seemed off for me to move into Jack's old house, so we decided to sell Julie's house and buy one that was new to both of us, and I would rent out both sides of the duplex. With that goal ahead, I started packing up my stuff, and one afternoon Jack came knocking on the door. I welcomed him warmly and offered him a drink, which he accepted. "What brings you by, buddy?" "I wanted to talk to you, Henry." "All right. Shoot." "Henry, I want you to promise me that you'll take care of my kids." "Of course, Jack. When they're with Julie and me, you know I'll treat them like they're my own." "That's not what I mean. Well, just promise me you'll take care of them forever." There was something in his tone that I didn't like, and I put the packing on hold and turned to him, giving him my full focus and attention. "What's going on, Jack? You're not thinking of doing something foolish, are you?" I wish he had made a big production of denying what I was suggesting, but he just gave a wry smile and shook his head. "No, man. It's nothing like that. I'm moving up to Seattle. A buddy of mine just became the GM at a dealership up there and wants me to come help out. It'll be a good job, and I won't be dependent on commissions anymore." "Well, we can work out a visitation schedule then. Holidays, summers, that kind of thing. No problem." "No, Henry. I'm leaving, and that's it. I want you to adopt the kids, or at least be the only daddy in their lives. They're young enough that any memories they have of me will fade eventually, and soon you'll just be their daddy. I don't want to put them through the broken home thing anymore. I think you and Julie will be together for a long time, and I want you to be a family." "Jack, come on. My mind is made up. If you want me to send child support, I will. I don't want you to think I'm trying to get out of it, but I'd rather it just be the end when I move. I'll just return any cards or letters that I get. Please, Henry, do me this one last favor. Take care of my family like I never could." There were tears in Jack's eyes, and I could feel them welling up inside mine, too. This had to be the hardest thing he had ever done, even more than telling me he had lied so that Julie and I could be together. And part of me admired his commitment to the happiness of those he loved, even though it came too late since he'd been the one to cause the problems in the first place. "All right, Jack." I told Julie about it that night, and she was saddened by it, but agreed with Jack that it was probably the best thing for the kids. We all found a family law attorney and did all the paperwork to make it legal, and a few months later Jack was gone to Seattle and out of our lives completely. My adoption of the kids was completed shortly thereafter, and just as Jack expected, the Henry was soon dropped from Daddy Henry. Meeting Jack changed my life. In fact, it could be argued that he simply handed me his, having fouled it up and wanting it to be made whole again. Of course, it's a work in progress. I'm still trying to build up my furniture-making business, and sometimes the kids miss Jack, but usually it's late at night when their minds are wandering, and we allow them to get the emotions out and then remind them that we love them. Soon our little clan will get a little bigger. Julie is 6 months along with a little sister that we plan to name Jacqueline, Jackie for short, in honor of the man that made her life possible. Someday we may tell her about him and how her parents came together, but at the very least we will honor her and her siblings by being true to each other as long as we both live.